Chapter 4, Afraid of the Dark. Johnny could feel it in the floor. The air was stale but different. The spores that once whispered lullabies of control now sat quiet, dormant. The darkness, once alive with fungal pulses and biometric scanners, was now still. No guards. No tests. No routines. It had been months since the last sedation cycle. The rations still came, like clockwork, but no one delivered them. They just appeared. The hallway doors that once screamed when opened, now they hissed softly, like they'd been told to behave. And the cameras blinked. Not like they used to, tracking his movement, reporting his pulse, blinking red when he spoke. Now, they died. For minutes at a time. Sometimes longer. He hadn't done anything. He hadn't torn through the walls. He hadn't triggered an uprising. He hadn't even approached the gap he found 2 weeks ago. A weak seam behind the biomass chute, leading somewhere deeper. Or maybe higher. He hadn't made his move yet. But something was happening anyway. Johnny sat in the center of Section D, surrounded by silent decay. The pods that once held his classmates now grown over, rotted, brittle with age. Their names long erased, their memories turned to vapor. And he felt it above. Like pressure building. Not an attack. Not containment. But collapse. Something up there was failing. And it wasn't him. He stood slowly, his bones cracking from too many years underground. He walked to the edge of his territory, the wall the vault forgot about, the one even the fungus avoided. He pressed his hand to the cold metal and whispered, not to the vault, not to the spores, but to himself. What the hell are you doing up there? And for the first time in years, the vault answered. Not with words, but with a sound. A scream. From above. Muffled by layers of steel. Human. Panicked. Fresh. He stepped back. Eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. He hadn't gone to them. But something had come down to him. Oh no. Oh no no no. Johnny's eyes widened as realization struck like a hammer to the chest. The silence. The failed systems. The cameras going dark. The power grid flickering. The scream from above. It wasn't just fear. It wasn't just death. The fungus. The spores. The ones that grew in the dark. That hummed in his mind for years. That tried to rewrite him, mold him into their shepherd. They weren't done. They weren't dormant. They were moving. He turned back toward the deeper shaft near the biomass chute, the one he hadn't entered yet. The one he wasn't supposed to find. The one that felt like an old scar in the vault's bones. But now, it pulsed. Not with light. Not with energy. With life. warm, slow, creeping life. Bioluminescent tendrils, thin as thread, had begun creeping up the ventilation columns. Tiny arcs of glowing growth had wormed through structural seams and access vents. A faint pulse now echoed through the floor like a heartbeat, not his. The fungus is rising. Not violently. Not explosively. Infiltration. Subtle. Intelligent. Like it learned from its first failure and decided it didn't need an alpha. It just needed opportunity. He dropped to one knee and scraped a cluster of spores from the floor. Faint blue shimmer, still warm. Fresh. He sniffed the air. UV trace levels. Not from the dark sector. From above. The light section. The one with schools. Families. Children. His hands clenched into fists. No, 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 he muttered, breath shaking. They thought it was ghosts. Shadows. Some side effect of containment trauma. They didn't realize the spores had breached. The creaks. The deaths. The hallucinations. They were the first stage. And now, it was climbing. Into duct systems. Into air filtration. Into vents that no one checks because Vault-Tec designed the vault to never be truly seen. They buried the truth below the light section, never expecting it to grow teeth. Never expecting it to remember. Johnny stared at the shaft, breathing hard, then turned toward the far wall, the sealed section he'd mapped from memory years ago. A path he never tested, because escape was never his goal. I told you, he whispered to the darkness, to the dead kids, to the Vault-Tec gods watching from whatever hell they'd built. When I get out, I'll burn this place down. He looked up. Toward the ceiling. Toward the families. Toward the unsuspecting lives above. But I'm not letting it take them, too. If the fungus gets out of the vault, it won't just infect. It won't just mutate. It will remember everything Johnny remembers. It will learn. And then it will spread. Above. Outside. Into the world that forgot it ever existed. He took a step toward the breach. And another. And in the dark, the old systems flickered awake for just a second. A terminal came online. No user input. Just one blinking message. Project Luminary, Phase 4 breach detected. Containment failure imminent. Subject, Vanjik. Status. Reacquired. The metal groaned around him like a beast trying to wake itself up. Steam hissed from pressure seams in the wall, slow and rhythmic, almost like breath. The vault was alive. Not metaphorically. Not anymore. Johnny stood in front of the breach. The old seam behind the biomass chute, now yawning wider than it had any right to. Beyond it he could smell the shift in air. Less stale. Less fungal. More processed. Filtered. The light section. It was no longer sealed. And the fungus knew it. He dropped into the service duct beyond, boots slapping metal. His muscles ached with age and starvation, but adrenaline pushed him forward. His blood ran cold, but his purpose burned. The vents were coated. Thin strands of mycelium stretched like nerve endings. Silent, luminescent. Like spider silk wrapped in nightmare. They pulsed as he passed them. Not reacting to him. Not attacking. Recognizing. He passed a utility hatch and paused. Someone had etched into the grime on the wall with their fingernails fresh. It sees me. The blood on the letters was still wet. He reached maintenance access level 3. A whisper away from the light section's foundation. A child's shoe lay in the corner. Tiny. Velcro strap half torn. No sign of the child. Just spores. Everywhere now. Blooming. Above him, a siren wailed once. Not the old war alarms. Not Vault-Tec's soft tone alerts. This was manual. Raw. Someone had seen it. And they were too late. He climbed the final rung of the ladder and pulled himself into the lower hallway beneath residential block 4B. It was chaos. Lights flickering. Doors hissing open and shut. Security shouting down non-functioning comms. And in the center of the hall, one of the shadows stood. Not a hallucination. Real. Physical. Fully formed. A humanoid figure, 9 feet tall, made of twisting muscle, exposed tendon, and veined fungal strands that glowed like veins of phosphorus. Its face was empty. Just a flat, smooth surface that pulsed with heat. And across its chest etched into the skin like it had grown there. V717DK. The shadow turned its head as Johnny emerged from the lower vent. It tilted, curious. Then it began to walk toward him. Slow. Measuring. Like prey finally turned around to face the predator. But Johnny didn't run. He cracked his neck. Spat blood on the ground. No more running. He stepped forward, into the hallway light, eyes burning. I made you. I survived you. And now I'm gonna end you. Behind him, the fungal mass crept like fog under the floor tiles. Ahead of him, the infected creature hissed, limbs cracking, ready to lunge. And from the vents above, spores rained down like ash. The vault had become a war zone. But Johnny Vanjik was no longer a prisoner. He was the reckoning. And the eradication was about to begin. The thing stepped forward, its feet slapping wet against the tile, its limbs dragging long trails of fungal secretion that smoked where it touched the walls. Its head twitched once, twice, like it was learning how to balance the weight of its own unnatural body. Its featureless face pulsed. Like it recognized him. Like it remembered. Johnny squared his stance. Blood crusted around his mouth. His shirt was torn from the crawl through the shaft, skin laced with old scar tissue and luminous spore burns that no longer hurt. They were part of him now. But they didn't own him. Nothing ever did. He took a step toward the creature. It hissed. And with a grin so cold it could have cracked steel, Johnny whispered, "Try me, motherfucker." The hallway exploded into motion. The shadow thing lunged, limbs elongating unnaturally. A high-pitched tone rang through the air, not a scream, but something like psychic sonar, built to paralyze. Johnny didn't flinch. He ran into it, shoulder first, slamming the creature back into the wall, cracking metal paneling with the impact. Spores burst on contact, igniting in the electric flicker like embers. He drove his fist not to punch, but to grab, wrapped his fingers around the thing's throat like mass and wrenched. The creature shrieked, its form writhing like coiled cables beneath skin. Johnny screamed in its face, voice raw, shaking with fury and clarity. "I know what you are. You're not a god. You're not a hive. You're a mistake. And I'm here to correct it." They slammed into each other again. The wall buckled. The spores screamed. Above them, somewhere in the light section, more shadows were waking. But now, someone was fighting back. For the first time in Vault 717's long, buried history, the darkness had something to fear. The creature reeled, leaking something black and glowing from its torn shoulder. It screeched less like pain, more like confusion. It had never known resistance. Never known a subject that spoke back, fought back, survived. But now Johnny wasn't just surviving. He was planning. He stood over the thing, breathing hard, fists bloodied, chest rising and falling like thunder. The hallway behind him flickered with dying lights, backup systems choking on static. Spores writhed in the corners, unsure whether to retreat or strike again. And Johnny spoke, louder than he ever had. "You blessed me with knowledge I shouldn't be capable of knowing." He kicked the creature in the side, sending it skidding across the corridor into a support beam that cracked on impact. "I know what you are. I know what Vault-Tec did. I know what the Enclave started and what they buried. I know where the reactors are. I know the layout of this entire goddamn vault because your damn hive couldn't help itself. It showed me everything." The thing twitched, tried to stand, faltered. Johnny pointed a shaking, furious hand at it. "You might be alive thanks to radiation and FEV. Maybe you are something ancient now. But there's such a thing as too much of a good thing, freak." He took a step back, toward the central corridor. Toward the power hub. Toward the heart of Vault 717's core systems. "You'd better stop me before I get to that reactor, you abomination. Because I'm locking this place down permanently. All of you. Every single Vault-Tec rat still hiding behind observation glass. Every freak show you let rot down here. Every corrupted chunk of fungus still pretending it's in control. I'm flooding this place with radiation so thick it'll make Deathclaws sterile. Then I'm getting the residents out. The people who never asked for this. The kids. The workers. The innocents you lied to. I'll burn this tomb down around you, and they'll walk free. And you. He grinned. One last, sharp grin like a blade across his face. You'll suffocate in your own garden. Behind him, systems lit up. Red access lights. Fuel lines. Fusion nodes. Manual override port unlocked. The creature hissed, now less confident, more desperate. It lunged. Johnny caught it by the throat. Slammed it into the reactor bulkhead. His face inches from the pulsing fungus wrapped around its skull. You better pray your gods are still listening. He slammed his fist into the override switch. Because I'm done being your prophet. I'm your goddamn executioner. Johnny's hand hovered over the final sequence. The reactor console glowing hell orange in the dark. The monster thrashed in his grip, black tendrils flailing, burning at the edges where his skin met irradiated steel. But he didn't flinch. Didn't blink. He was too far gone for fear, too focused for pain. His voice was low now. Deadly. Final. You know, I gotta give Vault-Tec a little credit. He leaned in, his blood dripping onto the control panel. The creature wheezed through a throat it shouldn't even have. For all the sick experiments. The lies. The horror. The unthinkable shit they did down here. He smiled. They did make one thing right. He slammed his elbow into the emergency radiation override switch. Alarms flared, klaxons screeched, lights turned red in every level of Vault 717. They made the best toy on the planet for wiping out bastards like you. The monster screamed. Not rage. Not pain. Fear. The fungi recoiled. Spores turned black. The light in the walls dimmed into panic. Down every corridor, containment shutters slammed shut. System-wide lockdown initiated. The hive tried to retreat. Tried to preserve itself. But Johnny had already lit the match. The reactor were charging. The core reached unsafe radiation thresholds within seconds. Radiation flood zones activated. And Johnny? He looked back once toward the vent that led to the light section. Toward escape. Toward them. He turned back to the creature beneath his grip, still spasming, still screaming. You had your turn. Now it's mine. He hit the final trigger. And as the reactor began to scream, as the vault shook under the weight of justice finally catching up with sin, Johnny Vanjik whispered, "Playtime's over." The vault shook like a dying god. Steam vented from shattered conduits. Sirens screamed in cycles, alternating between reactor warnings and evacuation alerts. 1,000 souls had lived in Vault 7, 17,800 residents, 200 staff. And now, those still alive were running for the exit. The light section, once orderly, had become chaos. Parents grabbed children, screamed names through smoke and static. Residents pushed past one another in the halls. Emergency lights pulsed red like heartbeats, and the intercom spat out cold, broken messages. Evacuation protocol Echo 2. Please assist citizens to designated. The main atrium doors, once sealed since the day the bombs fell, now hissed open one final time. The outer blast door was lifting. The surface was visible beyond. Sunlight filtered through dust. Faint, but real. Lancaster had survived the blasts long ago. The radiation outside had faded with time, weather, and soil. The outside world was returning. But not everyone deserved to leave. Johnny staggered into the central stairwell, shoulder burned, side torn open from the creature's claws, radiation already beginning to boil the blood in his veins. Didn't matter. The door was open. The people were escaping. And somewhere among the crowd, panicking, hiding, were the staff. The ones who'd done this. Who'd taken the children. Who'd pushed the buttons. Who'd silenced the parents. Who'd smiled through it all. Vault-Tech's quiet executioners. He couldn't let them disappear into the crowd. He slammed the override panel on the security access. The last thing he had strength for. Facial recognition, staff ID only. He coughed. Hard. Blood. Engage gate protocol. The system fought him, but the fungus was burning off the core, and for once, the system blinked. Recognized him. Confirmed override access from Section D. And the gates leading from residential block into the atrium. Locked. Steel shutters slammed into place. The crowd surged forward, panicking, screaming. Only one gate remained. One. And it scanned everyone who passed. Retinal ID. And if the system found a Vault-Tech staff designation, it didn't open. They tried to run. They tried to blend in. One woman clutching a lab coat under her jumpsuit was dragged away by the crowd before the system could reject her. Another man, Security Chief Blevins, punched a child in the face trying to bypass the scan. The gate didn't open. And Johnny was waiting at the top of the corridor. Smoke behind him. Light in front of him. Covered in ash and blood and memory. They saw him. The survivors. The children now grown. The ones who'd once lived above, never knowing what rotted beneath their feet. And Johnny, his voice cracked, low, trembling with fury and clarity. Let the people go. He pointed to the staff. But not them. A man in the back screamed, tried to shove past the scanner. The system denied him. Gas surged from the floor. He collapsed, twitching, gone. Another tried to climb a pipe to bypass the door. A panel opened above him, an old turret, one not fired in decades. It clicked once, then fired. Only the innocent were getting out. Only the ones who deserved it. Johnny wouldn't go. Couldn't. He knew the price. But the vault would not take Lancaster with it. It wouldn't infect the Earth again. It wouldn't start over. He would end it here. He leaned against the wall, bleeding, laughing, a little. He watched them go, one by one. Sunlight kissing their faces as they left the only home they'd ever known. And to those left behind, the monsters in lab coats, the ones who forgot what humanity was, he simply said, "*You buried us. Now it's your turn*. And behind him, Vault 717 began to die. The radiation was lethal. By all logic, he should have been dead. Every warning in the reactor's console blinked red. The FEV containment vats meant to be locked under 10 layers of fail-safe had ruptured from the shock waves. The spores had gone mad, spreading blindly into melting conduits, shorting systems across every level. And Johnny Vanjik, standing at the epicenter of it all, barely clinging to life moments earlier, should have fallen. But instead, he rose. His back straightened. Muscles tensed, not in pain, but power. The flickering lights in the corridor caught the reflection of his skin, radiation scorched, scarred with the spiraled branding of FEV, glowing faintly at the veins. And his eyes. God, his eyes. Burned brighter than the emergency strobes. Not human. Not fully. But something new. Something made to die, and refused. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. And laughed. Low. Sharp. Triumphant. "God damn," he growled, voice crackling like flame. "I have to hand it to you monsters." He took a step forward, the floor hissing under his boots. "I still don't know what that experiment of yours did to me." He opened his arms, as if embracing the storm. "But holy hell, I've never felt more alive." Behind him, the Vault tech staff, those who had escaped the retinal lockout, began to collapse. Their lungs failed first. Coughing fits turned to screams. Blood streamed from their noses, their eyes, their ears. Hair fell away. Skin peeled. Nerve endings caught fire from inside. The FEV in the atmosphere had gone wild, unrefined, uncontained. No stabilizers. No inhibitors. Just raw evolutionary chaos, melting them alive. They fell to the ground, writhing, begging, choking, reaching out. Too late. Johnny walked past them, slow and steady, as their pasts caught up to them in the most painful way possible. He looked down at a woman, one who once smiled as she handed out toy Vault uniforms to school children. Now her skin was sloughing off like paper in rain. She reached out, and he kicked her hand away. He stared out across the bodies, voice echoing through the dying vault. "I told you." His voice was calm now. Deadly. "I told you all you'd pay for killing those kids. You didn't just betray your oath. You didn't just sell out your fellow countrymen." His eyes swept the room. "You killed the very people you lived with before the bombs fell. I remember it all." His knuckles cracked. "I remember sitting in your classrooms. I remember eating in your kitchens. I remember riding in your cars to field trips. I remember the night my parents were busy and one of you babysat me." He shook his head, voice low. "If I knew the monsters you'd all turn into." He looked down at the last few still breathing barely. "I'd have killed you then." The vault trembled again. Ceiling panels fell. Alarms grew weak. The core was overheating. The spores, sensing the radiation flood, screamed one final time, a psychic shriek across the hive brain, but there was no one left to hear it but him. And he didn't flinch. Johnny looked to the open blast door, to the wind outside, to the sunlight cutting through dust, to the people already free. They had a chance now, because he paid the price. And he'd make sure no one ever buried a vault again. He turned one last time to the dying floor of Vault 717, voice steady. "Rest in hell." And then he walked out, into the light, into the world. And behind him, Vault 717 died screaming. The vault was crumbling. The reactor screamed its final warning. The fungus blistered and hissed, recoiling into the cracks like it knew there would be no regrowth this time. And the last of the vault tech staff, those who had once stood above it all, now crawled. Their skin bubbled. Their eyes burned. Their spines cracked in slow motion beneath the weight of their own failure. Their brilliant minds, trained in manipulation, control, and cruelty, now dissolved, neuron by neuron, into agony. They weren't scientists anymore. They were corpses in waiting. And as the enormous vault door, marked with the bold, haunting numbers 717, began to grind shut one final time, he appeared, framed in the exit, backlit by broken sunlight and a sky the vault hadn't seen in 2 centuries. Smoke and fire curling behind him like a cloak. Blood on his hands. Scars on his arms. Eyes glowing like the sun rising in the middle of the night. Johnny Vangeck. The last thing they would ever see. He didn't scream. He didn't whisper. He just smiled wide and terrible and spoke in a voice that echoed through the dying bones of Vault 717 like judgment carved in stone. "Tell me, nightmares." The staff, twitching, vomiting blood, dragging themselves through their own liquefying flesh. They looked up. He leaned forward. "Are you afraid of the dark yet?" Boom. The vault door slammed shut behind him, locking them in forever. And their screams, like the ones they once ignored in the dark section, were never heard again.